Welcome back to Overtime here on WOTM. We started the show with baseball, with the Braves specifically, but there's a lot of great things going on in baseball. Still in the first month, believe it or not, as we close out the first month. But there's a lot of guys and a lot of teams that we expected to do well, not necessarily doing so. We expected very little out of some players, and we're seeing the complete opposite. The NL East is specifically interesting because the Braves were favored and obviously expected a better Phillies team. Didn't know what we would see with the Mets. But some of the things that we'll look out for here, off to rough starts, players out of the NL East, and some of the ones that you highlight here, a couple from your hometown squad over there in New York.
Yeah, it's I mean, like you see the sunrise every day, you just start to expect it's going to come up. Victor Robles is a guy, though, for Washington who has had a kind of inconsistent major league career. You expect him to be better than this, one home run, one RBI, an everyday player. Brian Anderson is a guy I really like. Some of those prospects in Florida, as you saw with a lot of the trades that they made, these guys go on and they're superstars of the team. Ozuna is one of those guys that the Braves are enjoying now. Yelich is another guy. I loved Yelich when I first saw him play early on in his career. Anderson's a guy I think can be really good, struggling so far. Lindor got booed last night. Now, Met fans are brutal, okay? Let's just be honest. Met fans have about, like, a tiny bit of room of leverage and peace, and they're not going to let you get away with much. Right. You know, when you consider the fact that they've won 2 World Series in their history, and the Yankees have won like 400, Met fans have a bit of an identity problem. So Lindor has already been the target for them, and if he continues to play this poorly, he will be a target. But here's something that I think you should remember. Carlos Beltran, his first year with the Mets, his first full year with the Mets in 2005, only had 16 homers and 78 RBIs, and he played a full season.
Right.
And then the next 3 or 4 years, he hit over 40 homers. He hit over 290. I mean, it didn't stop him from taking a curveball right down the middle for strike 3 in Game 7 of the playoffs.
Right.
But he was a very effective offensive player after that, after a really, really tough first season in New York. Roberto Alamore was a guy who, when he came over to the Mets, really struggled his first year. I mean, Jason Bay, Jeremy Burnitz. There's a lot of guys that have been really successful other places, Carlos Baerga, and that have come to the Mets and just lost it. I don't expect that to happen to Lindor. He's too young, too good for that to happen to. So he'll eventually get better. Conforto's a guy, #1 draft pick, 2014, guy who had 30 homers last year, drove in 100 runs in 2019 rather. You expect him to do better, hit more home runs once the weather warms up. So I'm not so worried about that. And the Mets offensively, though, got a lot of questions.
Exactly. And also going to players that are having rough starts, also out of the same division, you got some Atlanta Braves players that are on there. And now these are the numbers going into tonight. Right. Marcell Ozuna's having a strong night tonight against the Chicago Cubs. But he's one of the guys that we expected maybe a nice little blast. It hasn't really got there. And some of the guys that we've seen in all-star games and whatnot, guys like Andrew McCutchen, guys like Garrett Cooper, who had a strong year last year, not necessarily living up to par in this division. Yeah,
I mean, now Adam Duvall, if you're a Braves fan, you're thinking, wait, what is he doing on there? He single-handedly defeated us when we played them earlier in the year. D'Arnaud is a guy who was a big-time prospect that the Mets got with Syndergaard, for R.A. Dickey when they traded him. So D'Arnaud can do some things, but after getting off to a good start, remember, he was a key figure on that 2015 Mets team that went to the World Series. His whole problem has always been staying healthy. I don't know why the Braves bat him in the middle of the lineup. I think that's a bad spot for him. He's having a hard time making contact. Ozuna, when he's not taking selfies of himself running around first base, striking out way too many times. But again, a very talented player who, once he figures it out, last year was one of the more underrated pieces for the Braves in the middle of that lineup. I thought he picked up for Josh Donaldson, very good. Josh Bell's a guy, 109, 17 strikeouts. There's so much of the strikeout now that really bothers me.
Right.
If you put the ball in play, there's much better chance. Guys just think strikeout's another out, and it's not. And Alex Baum, you should remember him as a Braves fan, too. He's the one that scored the winning run.
That's right.
McCutchen was a guy I thought was going to be a bona fide star with Pittsburgh, and he kind of lost it, too. Edgardo Alfonso, Carlos Bay, there were a lot of guys that kind of in their late 20s, all of a sudden their production just disappeared.
Exactly, and we'll not just pick on the NL East. We'll go to sprinkle some guys in from the American League, and you talk about a guy like Jake Bauers, also Brett Gardner for the New York Yankees, also kind of having some slow starts here, and that might just be a product of the fact that they just didn't, the season was just disjointed last year. Played a very short year last year, and then you came back this year and you're expected to play 162. And you perennial all-stars, a guy like Matt Carpenter, also not hitting the ball the way we thought. So these are some of the guys that we expect to do well, minimum 30 at-bats, and not looking so strong going into it.
Yeah, well, Matt Carpenter is a guy that has been a mainstay at the top of that lineup, and he's very beloved down there in St. Louis. A guy who hit over 30 home runs at one point in his career, 55 doubles one year. Just a dynamic offensive player. Frazier's a guy the Yankees had depended on as a prospect. Elvis Andrus, if you're a Texas fan, you remember him as being your starting shortstop for the years you made it to the World Series. Brett Gardner, one of the better players for the Yankees the last 10 years or so. Danny Dancer, we'll see on another graphic. I feel bad for him. Gurriel for Toronto, one of the young up-and-coming players. So not everybody's finding out so happy earlier in the year. And when you have Matt Carpenter hitting 075, it's more than just the fact that maybe that the pitchers are dominating. There are other things going on, whether it's the ball being changed or whether it's just the weather being miserable. So expect these numbers to change drastically when the weather gets warmer.
Exactly. Meanwhile, offensively, let's go to a team standpoint. The Detroit Tigers, one of the teams that are scoring under 4 runs per game. And teams that we expected to have strong offenses, like the New York Yankees, sitting here under 500. Philadelphia Phillies right there in there as well. The Cubs also not having the best year as far as runs scored, doing decently as far as differential goes. But you take a look at these teams and you see a direct correlation. You can't score runs. Your record's really, really going to suffer, even if you have decent pitching.
Now, if you're looking at that, what team shocks you the most on that list right there?
What shocks me the most is number one, probably the Mets, and two, the Yankees. The Yankees, like both teams out of New York, and also the Padres.
The Padres, I think,
considering the fact they have both Tatis and Manny Machado.
And they're supposed to be talked about. And Eric Hosmer's having a very good year.
Right.
So I think that number is really surprising me. The Yankees, like we said, the last time they finished last in the American League in batting average, runs, and RBIs was 1990, and they're on pace to do that. The Tigers, you didn't expect much from, but they do have Miguel Cabrera, who's one of the better players of his time. They do have a couple rookies that can hit the ball, and their pitching isn't that bad. And the American League Central, the teams we thought were going to be very good, like the Twins and the White Sox, are really struggling. And teams like the Royals and Indians are playing much better. So we'll see if that continues as the season goes on.
Exactly. The storylines obviously will still continue in Major League Baseball. Last thing we'll look at in the sport is some of the bullpen losses. Braves know all too well about some of these losses. Some heartbreakers there. Dodgers here recently having some struggles in their bullpen as well. But the Twins right now, 8 bullpen losses. Braves, White Sox, Giants, and Rangers all with 7. Well, coming up next year in Overtime, we'll close up shop with an interesting topic coming out of the college football world. Could the playoffs be expanding? We'll give you the number that's been tossed around coming up next here on our program.
How much do we even have time to do this?
Yeah. Well, I put 45, but she said that I might be able to do like 1 or 2 more. So I'll just ask you very, very quickly about top